Now let us see how order is manifested in the music of the classical era. Classical music certainly is the simplest repertory that we have examined so far. In fact, the simplest repertory that we shall examine at all in this course, and it is certainly the most orderly. There seems to be a place for everything, and everything is in its place. Indeed, people of the late 18th and early 19th century had certain expectations of music. I am asking you to learn these expectations. The first of these expectations has something to do with genre. That is, people of the time expected to hear certain types of music in a concert hall, and they expected to hear other types of music at home. Let's sort these out. And to do so, I ask you either to complete the table that you see above your podcast screen, set up for that purpose, or to copy that into your notes and to realize it as you view the podcast. Let's begin by taking a look at the concert genres of that time. Although the concerto was born in church, it has remained since the classical era the quintessential concert genre, and you can relate concerto to the concert hall just by looking at the two words themselves. Now, the performing forces required for a concerto are those that you would typically find in a concert hall and not elsewhere. That is, one or more soloist and orchestra. The next concert genre is the symphony. I'd like you to take a close look at the word symphony because you already know this word. We saw this word before in Latin stems rather than in Greek stems. So if you look at the word symphony, you know the P-H-O-N means sound, and sim, as in sympathy, which means to feel together with someone, means together, and so it means sounds together. Isn't this exactly what consonance means? Something sounds together, and if it does so in a classical language like Latin or Greek, it's considered to do so well together. So symphony means consonants, basically sounds well together. An orchestra is required to perform a symphony, and in fact a concert orchestra often is referred to as a symphony orchestra. Because both concerti and symphonies required an orchestra for their performance, these genres were normally presented in concert halls. However, they could appear in large households that had orchestras, courts for example. But this was clearly the exception, not the rule. When you think of symphonies and concerti, think of a large performing force, the inclusion of an orchestra, and associated with the place where you are likely to find that kind of an ensemble, the concert hall. Our first domestic genre is called the sonata. You can probably guess at its meaning because of the first syllable of the word, son, as in consonants. It means sound, and it is the Italian past participle that means sounded or played. It is a purely instrumental composition. Now, the sonata requires a rather modest performing force in comparison to a symphony or a concerto. Such compositions were normally scored for keyboard alone or for some solo instrument like violin, trumpet, etc., and keyboard. The small performing forces make it easy for you to associate this genre, the sonata, with its context, the home, a domestic setting. Another domestic genre is the string quartet, and just by looking at the name of the genre, string quartet, you probably already have some idea of what the performing forces are because the type of instrument and the number are specified in the generic designation. In fact, the ensemble needed to play a string quartet consists of 4 stringed instruments, 2 violins, 1 viola, and 1 cello. Notice that this is a small group of instruments, much smaller than an orchestra, and therefore one more suited for domestic use. Although you can attend concerts today in which you will hear sonatas and string quartets, sometimes only one or the other of these two genres performed in them, please remember that during the 18th century, such compositions were used only in domestic settings. When people put out money to attend a concert, they expected to hear a type of music that they could not hear at home. So when you think of these genres, the sonata and the string quartet, think of a domestic setting. Indeed, sonatas and string quartets were written for musical amateurs, and now is the right time for us to consider what this word means and to what it actually refers. The word amateur is both a French and an English word, and it literally means lover, in the sense of a lover of something, a lover of art, a lover of music, a lover of mathematics, etc. Although there are popular and colloquial notions or uses of the two words amateur and professional, the difference between the two is basically a matter of motivation. An amateur, the word means lover, does whatever he does for love, whereas the professional does it for money. There is no necessary difference in skill between the two. In fact, some of the very best musicians in the world today are musical amateurs. They have never performed in public, and they do not do so for money. So from now on in the course, when you hear me refer to music for amateurs, I am referring to domestic music. And we're going to see that a number of very challenging compositions, that is, compositions that are very difficult to perform, were written for musical amateurs. Just as people of the late 18th and early 19th centuries had the expectation of hearing certain kinds of pieces in certain settings, they also had an expectation of how many movements they would hear in each of these compositions. So let's take a look at how many movements each of these compositions has in it. And please use the table that you have above your podcast provided for this purpose to record what you discover in this presentation. Let's begin by looking at the three movement forms. The first of these is the concerto. And the concerto, as you recall, is a concert genre. The corresponding three-movement domestic genre is the sonata. Now let's name the four-movement forms. The four-movement concert genre is the symphony, and the corresponding four-movement domestic genre is the string quartet. If you compare the table that you have just completed to the table that you completed previously, you will see that they have something in common. The genres are presented in the same order and in the same quadrants of the two tables. So you can actually combine the two if you like. In fact, you do have to know the content of both of them, so make an effort to do so.